What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, managing editor of Fightful.com, FightfulMMA.com, and of course, FightfulSelect.com. This show brought to you ad-read free by FightfulSelect.com. Right now on Fightful Select, we have more on the pro wrestling side of things, but head over there. It is our premium service. We're doing pretty well so far. Lots of content up there, from retro shows, Q&A shows, weekly shows covering NXT, Ring of Honor, New Japan, Being the Elite, talking about my exclusive Fightful Wrestling Weekly, where I give you some behind-the-scenes news. Also, we interact over there with you, whether it's me, Jimmy Van, our tech team, all kinds of stuff over at FightfulSelect.com. And, of course, if you want more MMA coverage, we have Tuesday and Thursday shows. Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, the Holy Smokes MMA podcast with myself and former World MMA Award-nominated Showdown Joe. And then on Thursdays, the MMA Industry Podcast with James Lynch, who just interviews a ton of people from the management, the journalism side of MMA. Wonderful stuff out of him, as are his interviews. You can see his pros picks. You can see all kinds of interviews, including Israel Adesanya getting attacked by a bee. We got that at FightfulMMA.com. This was a fun show. We'll start from some of the more surprising things that happened on these prelims. One of which I think was, man, that Ariane Buller omoplata. It's kind of embarrassing to get caught with that, man. Like, it's only happened twice. Generally, that happens, you just roll right out. But I thought that Wycheck did such an amazing job closing off the hip and blocking the hip, because what you want to do there when you get the shoulder lock, and I know I've got a lot of pro wrestling fans who are tuning into this that have no idea what an omoplata is. And omoplata is basically the yes lock that Daniel Bryan does, the label lock, without the crossface. It is lacing the shoulder, but you apply pressure, you lean forward. Wycheck was able to get that position, and he blocked off the hip so masterfully. So what you want to do there is, instead of grabbing a crossface like Daniel Bryan would do, you reach around and you block off the hip. And that prevents a person in the situation of Buller, who's a buddy of Jinder Mahal's, perhaps coincidentally, from just rolling out. You just do a front roll, you get out, you scramble, and maybe you end up in guard, maybe you end up inside, maybe you end up on your feet, whatever. But Wycheck was able to prevent that. And with him being up against the cage, not Buller, Wycheck was up against the cage. That's no easy task, because if Buller was up against the cage, that would be far more impressive. But that wasn't the case. Then he flattened out Buller's hips. Oh, it looked so nice. And it is a little embarrassing. It's not quite the Von Flue choke, my friends. I won't go off about that. But still, an omoplata submission is equal parts impressive and embarrassing. But Wycheck getting that big win. Ariane Buller stopped after his UFC debut. Bummer for him. Not the only WWE connection. Luke Sanders, the boyfriend of Becky Lynch, who we have interviewed over at Fightful.com, defeated Patrick Williams. He just overmatched Williams. And it's kind of a bummer the way that his career got started off, because he had that great fight against Alcantara. Or not started off, but followed up after his debut. He had that great fight against Alcantara and got caught with a knee bar. But now he's 2-2 in the UFC. I know the UFC likes him. Also, I know that they like Becky Lynch being there at this card, and Dolph Ziggler, because both were shown on screen, including Becky Lynch. Like 4 times they went to her. So I know that they were rather happy that she made the trip there. Luke Sanders looked pretty good. Alejandro Perez looked good against Matt Lopez. This was a higher level fight than a lot of people would have expected, considering it was on the Fight Pass card. Matt Lopez has ran into some trouble lately with a Sun Sao. He got beat by Yaya, but he had won 2 of his last 3. Alejandro Perez, though, as I mentioned on the Holy Smokes MMA podcast this week, he's one to look out for. He's unbeaten in his last 6, and those wins include guys like Alcantara and Sukumtoth that our boy Luke Sanders, who we just talked about, couldn't beat. Keep your eye on Alejandro Perez. He is deserving of a highly ranked fighter next. Now, I'm not going to say like maybe, what's the harm in giving him Brian Caraway? Brian Caraway's ranked 8th. Give him Brian Caraway. There's no reason that Alejandro Perez should not be ranked at this point, because he's more than worthy. Guys, get your questions in. If you want, over on the live chat, of course, you can check out all these podcasts over at FightfulPods.com. Had somebody comment on my new setup. Yeah, I went back to the OG setup. I don't really like this one because don't like the title belts in the background and stuff from the ye olden indie days, but it's a more welcoming setup for me, and the TV's a little further from me when I'm covering stuff, so it's not as aggressive. But yeah, I did switch it up. I switch it up here and there, but thank you guys for noticing. Yushin Okami defeated Diego Lima. Oh man, this was brutal. And Diego Lima is probably on the outside looking in again. This guy, man. So he got to the Ultimate Fighter finals in Tough 19, got beat, lost his way out of the UFC, won in Legacy and Titan, came back on short notice, and or came back in the Tough 25 tournament. He just can't get it done in the UFC, man. And it's a bummer. He is now 1-5, I think, in the UFC, and Yushin Okami putting me to sleep. Putting me to sleep. SRS says, or Roy Soria says, SRS didn't want to do the favors, retired with the titles. So Hogan of him. To be fair, the one on the left, I did lose. The one on the right, I didn't. There you go. Company doesn't run anymore. But they never took their titles back, so whatever. What else we got on these prelims? Lauren Muller over Shayna Dobson. Not a lot to really talk about there. Gilbert Burns defeated Dan Moret. Yeah, Gilbert Burns, man. the second degree jiu-jitsu black belt, and a guy that we saw represent Brazil and like the I feel like it was the Pan. I don't know. World Cup. I know he went to the World Jiu-Jitsu Championships, and he got some submission wins that are earlier in his career, but when it started to go the distance, it wasn't working out for him. It just was not working out for him. He took some time off after the Prazeres loss. And to be fair, Prazeres missed weight like monumentally in that fight. I think by 3 or 4 pounds, Prazeres missed weight. Eesh. But he's come out and he's knocked a couple guys cold in back-to-back years. So the time off seems to have done Burns some good. And he got that new 4-fight contract, I think, late last year. And he's making a good impression now. Won 3 of 4 in fights where people make weight. He's only got 1 loss in like, I think, 8 or 9 fights in the company. So that says a lot as well. Brad Tavares over Krzysztof Jotko. Tavares wants Michael Bisping. Bro, I respect you and all that stuff. 4 straight wins, 5 out of the last 6. You beat Marquardt, Magalhaes, Theodoru, Latis, Jotko, but you ain't getting Bisping, man. Bisping's getting a bigger name than that. And it was Tavares' first finish since, get this, UFC 125 in January 2011. He's been around a while. He has been around a while, and here we have Krzysztof Jotko. He's out of that top 15. He's got to be out of that top 15. He's lost 3 in a row. Tavares, Hall, Branch, get him out of there. He looked great when he started up. He was bubbling under for so long that I think a lot of people slept on him, but that's not happening now. And as much as beating Atalis Latis means to me, it means a lot because he's a pretty good gatekeeper. Tavares belongs in his type of spot. And at number 15, Jotko should not have been 13 going into this. No, it's these UFC rankings. We got to use them because they use them. Even the New York State Athletic Commission uses them, apparently. We got to use them when talking about these fights because that's how UFC puts on some of their fights. But, man, clean it up. Good win for Tavares. John Moraga, man, I kind of wrote him off, and I regret it. I thought Wilson Hayes was going to submit him fairly easy, and I'll be honest with you, Wilson Hayes should have submitted John Moraga because John Moraga, like an amateur, held on to a guillotine choke while Hayes had him in side control. If you've ever listened to this show before, you're pretty aware of what that results in. The person on top reaches their forearm, underneath the head of the opponent. You push your shoulder down, you get a Von Flue choke. That's why you don't hold on to a guillotine choke from that position. It's elementary. You learn it the first time you do it, usually the first week of grappling class. And I saw it happen twice on tonight's show. I don't know what it is about UFC fighters, especially in the rather elite level of the flyweight division, where they just beg to be Von Flue choked. But I can't believe that Wilson Hayes didn't jump on that. And I think it cost him dearly because John Moraga didn't slow down. And John Moraga, I think under a year ago, or no, maybe it was January of 2017, after he got beat by Sergio Pettis, you had to wonder, like, what is his fate in this division? Because he was losing to established guys like Joseph Benavidez. He was losing to up-and-coming guys like Nicolau. He was losing to guys who were kind of in the middle there, like Sergio Pettis. And I thought because he fought Mighty Mouse, they would give him a fourth fight because they do that with guys who have won titles or competed for titles. He's come out and he's done, how I mentioned, an established guy, a guy on the come up, and a guy in the middle. He's beaten 3 of those back-to-back. Wilson Hayes, the established guy. Ashkan, the up-and-comer, and Bibulatov, who's kind of in the middle and had a performance of the night back in October as well. John Moraga and Wilson Hayes put on a good fight. And Hayes, I thought, was just a little not aggressive, or he just wasn't aggressive enough in his attempts to submit John Moraga because the opportunities were there over and over and over again. The rear naked choke was there. The guillotine was there. The Von Flue was there. I didn't like that Hayes wouldn't switch to a high crotch and control the body of Moraga a little bit better on one of those takedowns up against the fence. It was there. It was ready for him. Odd, but shout out to John Moraga, man. 3 in a row. After losing 3 in a row, his career definitely on the rebound. And Wilson Hayes, who was number 6, gets beat by the number 10 guy, so I could see those guys kind of swapping positions. Muslim against Ricky Rainey. He was so patient in just waiting and waiting and waiting for this knockout, and then it came. And Ricky Rainey knew it was coming. You could tell. Ricky Rainey, I don't want to say like an established guy in Bellator. He fought Michael Page, lost to Michael Page, but he'd been in Bellator for quite a while, I think 3 years, and finally got his shot in the UFC at age 34. He'll be 35 this year. Just this is the period of the Russians and the fighters from Dagestan who are infiltrating the UFC, and we saw it in Bellator. I'm sure Ricky Rainey witnessed it himself, and he gets to see it firsthand right here. And it's just the unbelievable patience of Salikov here that got him this victory. And I think he's a pretty well-rounded guy. He is the latest of people to pop up in the UFC after they've beaten Melvin Gillard. He had that loss to Alex Garcia in November, but I thought he looked pretty good here, all things considered. Shoeface. What can you say, man? I love watching this guy fight. I love watching Shoeface fight. Get this man a top 15 opponent. Tim Boach ain't that. He's a perennial top 15 guy. Boach he'll pop up in the top 15s. And maybe he had just come off that Hendricks win, but not just. It was like 10 months ago. And it was a good fight, but Shoeface just chokes another one out. Now, if he runs into a good striker, I don't know that he beats Bisping with Bisping's level of striking. I don't know that. I don't know that he beats Chris Weidman with Chris Weidman's power. Does he beat Vitor with Vitor's hand speed even at this age? I don't know. But can he choke any one of those guys out? Yeah, maybe with the exception of Chris Weidman based on his wrestling. Shoeface deserves a top 10 opponent in my estimation, as does Brad Tavares, but they don't need each other. Do not give them each other because they both deserve better than each other, if that makes any sense. Tavares versus Shoeface won't make a name of either one of them, but a Tavares against a Vitor or a Bisping, one of those two against them, even though I know I said that Tavares shouldn't get Bisping. Probably not in the retirement fight. He's a little more marketable than that. Vitor, not so much. Maybe a Brunson, Gastelum, somebody. A Machida, any one of those. I don't know if I'd like to see Shoeface against Machida. I don't know if I'd like to see anybody against Machida at this point. That's boring, man. Machida is not fun. Not my style. But Shoeface looking good. Let's run down the history of Shoeface. Boach, Marshman, Spicely, Vittori, Leonardo. That's 5 in a row. 5 in a row with 4 rear naked choke wins. Whoo boy, he had those 3 wins on Tough. He fought at heavyweight on Tough. Just continues to impress. If you all have ever listened to the Holy Smokes MMA podcast, I love this guy. Got to round out his game. But he just turned 28. He's got plenty of time to do that. The middleweight division skews a little bit older. It's one of those weird divisions because it skews a little older, but younger people are kind of taking it over because of Robert Whittaker. But you got Romero, Souza, Bisping. Bisping and Belfort about to drop out of those rankings once they retire, if they ever retire, if they ever get to. Machida will as well, but I'd watch out for him. I really would. Michelle Watterson, Courtney Casey. This fight was a banger, my man. Oh, boy. Courtney Casey didn't use her length. And I'm going to say this. I thought Courtney Casey won the fight. Michelle Watterson won the fight after the scorecards are read. I had it for Courtney Casey. However, I thought that Courtney Casey really could have sealed it up had she used her length to her advantage, but she didn't. And sometimes you'll run into that. Michelle Watterson's speed was too much for Courtney Casey's length to overcome. Michelle Watterson hit just a beautiful teep that sent Courtney Casey across the cage during this fight. Unbelievable. I think that Courtney Casey showed that she belonged in that top 15 or that top 10, especially despite her 7-6 record, despite the fact that she's lost 3 of 4, and that sometimes she can't pull out those wins. She does have. She should have beaten Michelle Watterson. She did beat Jessica Aguilar. You can say what you want about those fights, but Courtney Casey belongs. As far as Michelle Watterson, it's hard to be mad at a Michelle Watterson for winning that type of fight, right? Michelle Watterson came in and brought it to Courtney Casey and vice versa. And they went at it for 3 rounds. And a lot of times when you see women's strawweight fight going 3 rounds, it's not maybe the most exciting fights. It can be a technical battle. It can be a war, but this was a mixture of both. And I thought it was really, really good. I think Casey could, like I said, that record's going to maybe haunt her a little bit because 7-6, you're going to read that and a lot of people are going to kind of write her off, but she can hang. She's good to go. Get in your questions, you guys. Lecomate says, good for the karate hottie. Yeah, man. I wish I could break this down more stylistically, but it was one of those technical brawls, much like what we saw in the main event, although there's a lot more to get into in that main event. They went at it, and I started to notice that in the later rounds that Michelle Watterson started to pick up, I don't want to say a second wind, but pick up her wind, and was really utilizing strike or body kicks at range to her advantage, which was weird because she was not the rangier fighter. Ultimately, she was. Physically, she wasn't. Because Watterson was able to just get inside, get out, get inside, get out towards those later rounds. And I think that maybe that stuck in the judges' minds. Like I said, I think Casey should have taken that one. It is what it is. Israel Adesanya against Marvin Vettori. I don't think that Vettori should have won on either scorecard or any scorecards here. But Israel Adesanya did not look great. There are much better prospects at this weight division than a 29-year-old kickboxer, almost 29. He will be by the time he fights next. And I'm not saying he's not good. He is. And he's very marketable. He's very entertaining. He's very outspoken. What's going to happen when he runs into a wrestler? I mean, a real wrestler. Now, Vettori is a brown belt, I think under, Filippo maybe? I don't know. And he's a young guy, but who's done fairly well in the UFC. But he hasn't submitted anybody in a couple years, and I don't know, man. And he was a submission specialist, is a submission specialist, I should say, despite his last 3-4 fights going to decision. Israel Adesanya needs to be tested against a wrestler because otherwise you're not going to know what you have in him. And I don't know how long you can really heat up a guy that has 30 boxing and kickboxing fights and 13-0 in MMA. Israel's got to keep working. And he'll do fine. He'll get better. But this one was not the coming out party that Rob Wilkinson fight was for Israel Adesanya. The party didn't continue. The float was slowed down. Float was slowed down for one Carlos Condit as well. I didn't know how anybody thought Carlos Condit was going to win this fight. I said it on the show this week. There has been nothing that he has shown me in the last 4.5 years that has indicated to me that he was going to win this fight. A doctor stoppage over Thiago Alves doesn't do that for me. Not when you're in there with Alex Oliveira. Alex Oliveira. Same guy that tapped out Tim Means, slept Will Brooks. Not buying it. Not buying it. I don't care if it's a week notice. If Oliveira makes the weight, he was always going to beat Condit. That guillotine choke was masterful. Props to Carlos Condit for fighting it. Also, props to the referee. Some A+ refereeing in this fight. Not so much on the commentary end. I don't know what was up with Daniel Cormier, man. Daniel Cormier was quick on the call for a lot of this stuff tonight. And I have a whole different issue with the commentary because, okay, Daniel Cormier, very, very quick to call the end of fights. You just don't do that. I learned that pretty early on. I did that a lot, and you can't do it. You just can't do it. Also, Dominic Cruz was calling like his teammates' fights, I think, a couple times tonight. Don't do that. Not after the last time when you had Dominic Cruz caping for one of his guys. No, stop doing it. I don't think it was happening in this fight, but so Alex Oliveira now has won 3 of his last 4, but perhaps most impressively, he's lost 1 fight over his last 7. He has never lost consecutive fights. He does have 3 or 2 no contests and a draw. So he is out of 26 fights. He only has 4 losses. That is incredibly impressive. He has just delivered. He's given you a finish. Even when he got beat against Yancy Medeiros, he had fight of the night. He had performance of the night against LaFleur. Just, it seems like the welterweight move has been a good one for him because just lightweight wasn't for him. And it's weird to think that frame ever made that weight. I can't wait to see Alex Oliveira fight again. It's funny because he fought Cowboy Cerrone a couple years ago in the Cowboy versus Cowboy fight, and he is turning into like Brazilian Cerrone. He's a good, well-rounded fighter, exciting, will step in on short notice, will fight anybody anywhere. I mean, he'll fight in America, he'll fight in Brazil, and he'll do it on however much amount of time you need. He'll put on a performance of the night, he'll put on a fight of the night, he'll fight at welterweight, and I'm sure, you know what, I bet he'd probably fight at middleweight if he wanted him to. Now, here is the question about Carlos Condit. And it is, it's going to be there. Should Carlos Condit retire? I'm going to say no. I don't think Carlos Condit should retire. Will he still be in the UFC? That I can't speak on. Does the UFC want to keep paying him $1.15 per? Plus he gets that good on that Reebok money. Well, I don't want to say that good. But for Reebok money, it's that good. He's been there a while. He's been there for a long time. And the thing is, he's not getting knocked out. He is getting submitted. He is getting split open rather grossly, but I think he's not been knocked out clean. Maybe ever. I know he had the TKO to he had the knee injury to Tyron Woodley. I I don't think he's ever been knocked out other than that. So let him keep going. Maybe not in the UFC. Definitely not against top 15 guys. Definitely not against top 20 guys. He is 2-7, I think, in his last 9. Don't do that. Not anymore. Some would argue he's 2-8 of his last 10 because of the Nick Diaz fight, but nothing since that Nick Diaz fight has shown me that he should be in the top 10, top 15, anything. Pull him out, get rid of him. I know he's fighting some top flight competition. Just give him another guy. You got Gerald Harris out there begging to fight Yushin Okami and Carlos Condit, and he's got a 3-1 UFC record, got bounced from the UFC forever ago. Do that. Put him in there against somebody. Make some fun, interesting, different matchups. Otherwise, Carlos Condit, head over to Bellator. You'll make more than the $115 for show money. You'll probably make $200. They'll probably a lot of people saying, well, he'll get a title fight. Hey, I don't think he cares about that. I don't think he cares about that at this point. He almost retired. He'll be 34 next month. He is every bit of 47 in cage miles. He's fought 42 times that we know of. His first fight was in 2002 that we know of. Man was fighting like Jake Shields in 06. He went Trigg, Shields, Healy over the course of a couple months. He fought Trigg and Shield in the same night. Man's going to have some miles on him. Godspeed, Carlos Condit. That upkick did it in for him. Not often we see an upkick these days change the course of a fight like Alex Oliveira did with that one. And Condit was split open pretty nasty. And on commentary, they were saying, yeah, that'll help Oliveira. I don't think Oliveira gave a damn about slipping out. He was there to do damage from the bottom. He was going to do it. If Condit stayed like kind of lackadaisical. But, oh boy, that upkick was something. That main event was something. Dustin Poirier. Justin Gaethje. They are who we thought they were. This was awesome. How could it not be fight of the night? Got a feel for Michelle Watterson and Courtney Casey because they put on a banger. But this one's the main event. This one is fight of the night, might be performance of the night. I don't know. There were some other finishes they could give that one too. Got to give Wycheck a performance bonus for getting an omoplata win. But early on, Justin Gaethje started those low calf kicks, and those have revolutionized MMA. Man, the thing I love so much about MMA is it's always changing, and Justin Gaethje is he's a good indication of or a good example of MMA changing, but still the heart of MMA being a war in the cage, because sometimes Gaethje's best defense is to play peekaboo and just throw his hands up and wait for the other guy to get done. Doesn't always work out great for him. It did for a little while tonight. It didn't in that 4th round. Gaethje does that low calf kick that has really, really, like, it's so recent that I stopped training a couple of years ago, at least regularly. I've never felt a extended calf kicks. And I see them being delivered in training and stuff, and I see them being delivered in the cage, and it's a completely new facet of the game. Not completely new, but it's a really new facet of the game. Much like the oblique kicks from John Jones changed things. Much like the teep kick started to change things. Much like the Anderson Silva front kick started to change things. There's always somebody that comes along and adapts and brings this, and somebody else says, you know what, I'm going to add that to my arsenal, and then soon everybody has it in their arsenal. Justin Gaethje he was getting dividends paid off for those leg kicks, but unfortunately for him, outside of the occasional counter, that's about all he had. Poirier was doubling up on this striking output, and Poirier was able to measure. This is your mates plugging up the PlayStation, pick and stand and bang mode on UFC 3, not employing foot movement. Like we saw in the later rounds of the Michelle Watterson-Courtney Casey fight, the lateral movement of Michelle Watterson kind of go away, and she started to go like kind of back and forth instead of laterally. Wasn't a whole lot of this anyway. When Gaethje would get hurt, he would kind of back up and try to circle out. And then at the end, when we saw that vicious combo, Poirier took advantage. Now, there were a series of eye pokes in this fight that got Gaethje a point deducted. It ended up not mattering, but UFC should really, really jump on those Bellator gloves, those Bellator Everlast gloves that kind of curve your hand naturally. I think that's the way to go. That's the jam. The one thing that particularly frustrated me about Poirier in this was the fact that Gaethje had his hands up like this, but didn't go to the body. Poirier didn't go to the body. That was a little confusing to me. I know that he felt like he could measure Gaethje up, and he did. But I think that this fight would have been over maybe in the late second, middle of the third round had this not happened, or had he went to the body. Sorry, rather. After the fight, a complete war. Poirier calls out Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, if Connor's not done dicking around, and Tony Ferguson had to have knee surgery, I would do Khabib Dustin Poirier, especially with his striking ability and what I saw out of Khabib last week. That's a competitive fight to me. It's a good fight. Dustin Poirier lost 2 of his last 13, lost 1 of his last 9, I think. He's the man to do it. Some people are like, oh, how about Eddie Alvarez? How about no? How about he's won 1 of his last 4? How about he gets back on the horse? He gets in there. He does that. Justin Gaethje, on the other hand, he is going to keep being their fight of the night machine, even though he lost to Alvarez, even though he lost to Poirier. He has 3 fights in the UFC. All of them are fight of the nights. One of them was fight of the year. What more can you ask for out of the guy? He shows up out of World Series of Fighting. He's getting paid at least $100K per, not including the Reebok stuff. He is a guy, a rare guy, who off of 2 losses could command more money than when he came into the UFC. He's 1-2. If his contract were up tomorrow, he'd be able to say, you know what, instead of that 100 to win, 100 to show, how about we do 150? Where does Gaethje go from here? It's tough to say. I would like to see, of course, everybody would like to see him fight like a Nate Diaz or something. That's a dream fight, in my estimation. Chiesa would make a lot of sense. Maybe a Pettis. I think those are the right calls. Somebody said, look, Komite says no rematch. Yeah, I don't want a rematch. Poirier won convincingly. He won convincingly. Lacomite says the Justin backflips make me nervous. Yeah, me too. People talking wrestling in the chat. What the hell y'all doing? What the hell y'all doing? That's UFC Glendale. Join us on Tuesday. We're going to talk more about this show. I'm very excited. Oh, somebody asked me to clarify on this Becky thing. Oh, God. So I saw this Becky, some wrestling fan. Now, I ran a crossover website for about 2 years, MMA, pro wrestling, boxing. Did some training myself. I speak at length with people who do both. And somebody said, Becky could do well in the strawweight division in the UFC by getting a trainer similar that worked with Ronda Rousey or Gina Carano in the past. Somebody followed up and says, would do better than Punk, that's for sure. Becky has a legit grappling background. Taking punches is a different story, though. Wouldn't want to mess up her good looks. Well, first off, shut the fuck up. Mess up her good looks. Good God. She's a tough girl. She does not have that legit of a grappling background. Certainly not more legit than Punk now being at Rufus Sport for over 3 years. So cut the shit. Also, no. I would never recommend anybody that worked with Ronda Rousey or anybody to Edmund Taverdian. I think Edmund Tverdian is a big reason why Ronda Rousey isn't in the UFC. I think Edmund Tverdian's a big reason why Shayna Baszler and Jessamine Duke weren't in the UFC for longer than what they were. That's just me saying. Dumb. Leave us a thumbs up. Subscribe. Tuesday, Holy Smokes MMA podcast. Tune in. Visit Fightful.com. We got all your coverage. Head movement, punches. We're out.